redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
Welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. On this Thursday edition, the show or the podcast that brings you objective truth in a world of lies. There's a few things that I want to talk to you or talk to you about today. First off, let me tell you, please support my sponsor, Mike Lindell, MyPillow.com. Right now, there are Percale sheets that are available while supplies last. Typically, a queen set sells for $89.98, but my listeners can get them for $39.98. Guys, these Percale sheets have a 10-year warranty. They have a 60-day money-back guarantee. And you guys know that by purchasing from MyPillow, you'll be supporting American manufacturing, American jobs, and an American patriot in Mike Lindell, who has been fighting for election integrity for all of us, frankly. So use my promo code Carl. Just use my name, C-A-R-L. Go to mypillow.com. Click on the radio listener square. And use the promo code Carl. And then you can apply. The deal will apply to you once you enter that promo code. But that goes for everything that's on MyPillow. Just use that promo code and you'll get any applicable deals that are out there. And I appreciate Mike Lindell and MyPillow. Also subscribe to the podcast wherever podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube. We're really trying to build up YouTube and Rumble. So please, if you like watching the podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble channels, or either or, and follow me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show. It was so fun and a blessing to fill in for Dennis Prager yesterday and the Officer Tatum. But I'm glad to be back here with you. All right, so several things that I want to talk about. Obviously, in the news, the big story still is the so-called student loan forgiveness. I want to get into that. Also, there's a couple of other stories, things that I want to talk about that I think are pretty big deals that are occurring in the news. One is the Uvalde School Board has voted unanimously to fire Chief, what is his name? Pete Arredondo. We'll talk about that briefly. Also, right here, flipping through my formerly fingerprinted fingertips, hat tip to the Daily Wire. Joe Biden says he didn't have any advance notice of the Trump raid. Are you sick and tired of these fools just straight up lying to us, gaslighting us when we know exactly what's happening, especially considering memos have come out to suggest otherwise? Let's start with this story with the liar in chief. Joe Biden, again, says he didn't have any advance notice of the Trump raid. So Joe Biden insisted yesterday that he had, quote, zero advance notice of an August 8th FBI raid on former President Donald Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago. The FBI raid, again, unprecedented in U.S. history, kicked off the speculation of who knew about it beforehand and to what extent Biden himself knew about the raid or was involved in the raid, given that Trump could be his opponent in 2024. Fox News' Peter Doocy put the question out there to Biden on Wednesday. And then Biden said, listen, and I'm quoting, I didn't have any advance notice, none, zero, not one single bit. This is how Biden responded, with his thumb up and forefinger together to form a zero to emphasize his answer. But following days of silence after the raid, Attorney General Merrick Garland took credit for the raid, or took the blame for the raid. But we know that isn't true. Why do we know that's not true? Because you guys might recall, I talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I believe a couple of days ago on the podcast, but let me refresh your memory just in case just the news got their hands on some documents, and they were able to find out that the Biden White House facilitated the DOJ's criminal probe against Trump. And they totally scuttled the privilege claims, the executive privilege claims. This was out in memos. So hat tip just the news. It says here, long before professional prior knowledge of the raid on Trump's estate, the Biden White House worked directly with the Justice Department and National Archives to instigate the criminal probe into alleged mishandling of documents, allowing the FBI to review evidence retrieved from Mar-a-Lago this spring and eliminating the 45th president's claims to executive privilege. This is unheard of. You might remember George W. Bush signed an executive order giving prior president's executive privilege, in case once their predecessor came into office, if they had any disputes on records or paperwork or whatever, they would be able to work it out, president versus president. And with the National Archives, Obama came in, he reversed that, went back to the Reagan era stuff where, you could, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to give the former president executive privilege, but I believe people kind of follow that tradition regardless. Well, not so with Biden. He wants to be able to win and stay out of jail past 2024. So this is what he did. He sicked the FBI and the DOJ on former President Trump. The memo showed then White House Deputy Counsel Jonathan Su was engaged in conversations with the FBI, the DOJ, and the National Archives as early as April, shortly after 15 boxes of classified and other materials were voluntarily returned to the Federal Historical Agency from Trump's Florida home. By May, this guy Jonathan Su, had conveyed to the archives that President Joe Biden would not object to, so he spoke to him, waiving his predecessor's claims to executive privilege, a decision that opened the door for the DOJ to get a grand jury to issue a subpoena compelling Trump to turn over any remaining materials he possessed from his presidency. So the most complete summary was contained in a lengthy letter dated on May 10th that acting National Archivist Deborah Steedle Wells sent Trump's lawyers summarizing the White House's involvement. And here, okay, so there's a letter, there's a memo that directly connects Biden's White House to the Trump raid. And this fool is sitting in front of all of us lying when the evidence is out there. Here's what the letter says. On April 11th, the White House counsel's office affirming a request from the Department of Justice supported by an FBI letterhead memorandum formally transmitted a request that NARA provide the FBI access to the 15 boxes for its review within 7 days, with the possibility that the FBI might request copies of specific documents following its review of the boxes. This is Wall wrote Trump this, his defense attorney Evan Corcoran this. So the White House had been in touch with the DOJ, with the National Archivists, all of them. Biden just lied. But this is what this guy does. The letter revealed that Biden empowered the National Archives and Records Administration to waive any claims to executive privilege that Trump might assert to block DOJ from gaining access to the documents. Unbelievable. I'm quoting here. The counsel to the president has informed me that in light of the particular circumstances, this is the lady that's in charge of the National Archives. The counsel to the president has informed me that in light of the particular circumstances presented here, President Biden defers to my determination in consultation with the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel regarding whether or not I should uphold the former president's purported protective assertion of executive privilege. This is what Wall wrote. She goes on to say, I have therefore decided not to honor the former president's protective claim of privilege. Why? Because Biden had given her permission not to do so. So the memos provide the most definitive evidence to date of the current White House's effort to facilitate a criminal probe of the man, Joe Biden, of Donald Trump, and the guy that he might face again in 2024. So this fool just lied to us, but that's what they do. That's what they do. They straight up lie. Real quickly here, let me get on to this Uvalde news. Uvalde School Board votes unanimously to fire Police Chief Pete Arredondo. You don't say. All right, so here's a summary. Had tipped the Daily Wire. The Uvalde School Board voted unanimously on Wednesday night to immediately fire Police Chief Pete Arredondo over the disastrous response to the Uvalde shooting at Robb Elementary that happened obviously earlier this year. 19 children dead, two teachers dead as a result of the lone gunmen coming in and shooting them up. Approximately 400 freaking law enforcement officers on site. Yet those children were many shot to death. Sitting in that classroom with the lone murderer. All right. I'm a shooter. That's a murderer. All right. with the lone murderer for 77 minutes. And a lot of people blame Chief Pete Arredondo because they simply didn't react. Many people in law enforcement, you heard them all over talk radio that said, listen, when we're in a situation like that, there's an active shooter situation, the cop goes in and the cop becomes, this is the bravery of our men in blue. The cops rush into a scenario like that where they become the target instead of the children. Because obviously they can face down the murderer with their own firearm, or they'd rather for an adult or a law enforcement officer to be shot as opposed to the children. That didn't happen there. So the Arredondo refused to attend the school board meeting because he was scared for his safety. The Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District had already recommended that Arredondo be fired. Here is a quote from his attorney. His attorney's name is George Hyde. And he says here, quote, Chief Arredondo will not participate in his own illegal and unconstitutional public lynching and respectfully requests the board immediately reinstate him with all back pay and benefits and close the complaint as unfounded. So the board deliberated for an hour. What did you expect the board to do? Parents are there. People in the community are there. They deliberated for an hour, meaning they already had their minds made up, like I would have too. They went back, they grabbed a snack, played it off and said, all right, let's go back in and fire this fool. So the Uvalde citizens waited weeks for the decision after the first meeting to consider Arredondo's firing. That was canceled months ago, and that was after 2 days. That was 2 days after the recommendation had first come down. But he's gone now. You guys may recall that kids were literally still in the classroom calling 911 as some officers waited inside of the hallway. Again, some outside. Some officers were prevented from going inside. As a result of Arredondo's orders, from what I understand, he tried to negotiate with the murderer. This is what he said to him. Part of what he said, at least, quote, let me know if there's any kids there or anything. He said this on tape, and he said, this can be peaceful, quote, unquote. Now, that did lead some to believe maybe this guy, Arredondo, didn't realize that there were children inside still, and maybe there was some bad communication. These were people that obviously they had recently undergone training for an active shooter situation in schools. But I mean, small community, perhaps didn't have the best of training, obviously didn't have the best of chiefs on staff. Anyway, it didn't work out well. It did not work out well. Again, 19 children unnecessarily dead, and two teachers dead. We have to really harden these schools. One entrance point. Obviously, you want more exits available if you do have an active shooter inside of a school. So that's something that can be worked out. You're going to need metal detectors. I'm sorry. This is the society we live in, with this social media society that we live in today, where not just kids, but shooters crave attention. And anyway, just sin and removing God out of our culture, removing God out of our schools. You can expect things like this to happen more so. So here's Arredondo's statement to the Texas Tribune in early June. And he says, and I quote, not a single responding officer ever hesitated, even for a moment. The video came out. That wasn't true. To put themselves at risk to save children. He says, we responded to the information that we had. And had to adjust to whatever we faced. Our objective was to save as many lives as we could, and the extraction of the students from the classrooms by all that were involved saved over 500 of our Uvalde students and teachers before we gained access to the shooter and eliminated the threat. Now, I have no doubt that there were other pieces of the school that were partitioned off so that, and some parents literally hopped the fence to go in and get their child. But I'm sure some officers were there doing the best that they could. Mass confusion, too many chiefs on site perhaps Arredondo or somebody should have taken charge and said, this is what we need to do. And we need to isolate this shooter. We need to go in and pop a cap in this fool's behind. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Again, I'm sure there was a mix-up of communication, but that's no excuse when you got 19 kids murdered, 2 teachers murdered, 400 law enforcement on site. Just doesn't make sense. Here's something interesting. The UCISD police chief also Arredondo told the Tribune that, quote, when he arrived on the scene, he didn't consider himself the commanding officer, even though his department was the first to arrive. Secondly, Arredondo claimed that no one told him that students in the classroom were calling 911 as the shooter continued his killing. And I believe that might be a true statement. But it just goes to show you, listen, guys, we got to be ready. Police officers have to be ready for these types of scenarios. I don't want to sit time or waste time here degrading the blue, but this was a massive screw up. And obviously, I don't think anyone denies that at this point. All right. So now let me move on quickly to the really big story of the day. Obviously, it broke yesterday evening. I was able to talk about it. They were contemplating it while I was on Dennis Prager's show. By the time that I sat in for Officer Tatum, the news had broken that Biden was going to be signing this student loan forgiveness.
Student loans or chose not to take out loans?
Is it fair to people who, in fact, do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses to see why these guys get involved? What do you think?
Guys, let me tell you what this really does. This is going to be absolutely disastrous. There's a lot of people that are clapping their hands that are happy. A lot of people that are the upper echelon of society that really believes because they've gone to college that this isn't gonna that they're just going to be forgiven $10,000 a student loan debt, $20,000 if you received a Pell Grant, and I believe you make under $125,000 a year. This is an absolute joke. Let me tell you 4 things that this thing does. I was talking about 3 earlier, but I put this out on Twitter, but I should have added the 4th, or actually I should have probably started with the 4th. This is the reinstitution of slavery by the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party loves slavery. All you have to do is look at the actual slavery in America, where the vast majority, over 90 something percentile, were the Democrat Party themselves, were Democrats. That's all you have to look at. Look at the South. You're talking about the Jim Crow South. Democrats, no, there was no big switch like the Democrats like to lie and say they were the racist party. You had one Senate Republican that switched to the Republican Party. The other 20 plus or so remaining stayed in the Democrat Party. There was no big switch until there was a Newt Gingrich revolution in 1994. So that's it. The big switch is a complete and utter lie, just a complete and utter lie. So what this thing does is it reinstates slavery. Basically, now what you have is you have poor people or working class or poor to middle class working people that are going to have to pay for the student loan debt of those that are going to make more money than them. Right? On average, that are going to make more money than them. That's slavery. You're forcing people to work to pay for someone else's lifestyle. Just like slaves had to do to their masters, to the plantation owners. They worked to pay for their master's lifestyle. Now, those of you in the working class, those of you in the middle class are going to have to work to pay for your master's lifestyle. These people with college degrees. I'm going to share a story with you that was on the Daily Caller. Absolutely fascinating. CNN. This should be the story. CNN actually had an economist on there that was telling the truth. Also, what this does, this is obvious, buys votes in time for the midterm. So a lot of people that might have been lacked the motivation to show up on election day to vote for the Biden administration perhaps will now go and vote for the Biden administration unless they understand math. Because listen, guys, Biden may forgive $10,000 or $20,000 of your student loan, but you're going to pay for it anyway. You're going to pay for it in inflation. You're going to see that price on the shelves, whether it's gas prices, whether it's food prices, you're going to see it. And not only that, if the Federal Reserve hikes the interest rates again, and they will have to, since these fools keep spending money An Inflation Reduction Act? Yeah, right. Over $700 billion, another $300 billion to Ukraine, and now $300 billion in debt relief. Some estimates already are saying if this is going to cost $900 billion, not 300, but $900 billion over the long term if this completely goes through. And it looks like it's going to go through because the Democrats are completely desperate, right? It's unbelievable. So all of you people that think you're not going to pay that 10 and 20, no, you're going to actually pay more because inflation is going to hit. Inflation is going to make your dollar weaker. You're going to see it when you go as a consumer, when you go buy other commodities and necessities and things that you need, you're going to see that. And I guarantee you, since the left continues, since the Democrat Party, let's not just blame Biden, since the Democrat Party continues to spend your money, you're going to have to pay it back in inflation. There's going to have to be interest rate hikes where they're going to have to force us into a recession to get a hold of this. Another thing, this puts a down payment on a deepening recession. That's all it does. Guys, we're in a recession. 2 consecutive quarters of economic decline. That's a recession. I know the Democrat Party wants to pretend like we're not in one, and I'm not trying to say the sky is falling, the sky is falling. I don't think we're in a massive recession, but we are in a recession. There's been economic decline for 2 consecutive quarters. Everyone has defined it that way until Biden. He doesn't get a pass, especially when this guy's the worst president in the United States history, in my opinion, at this point. And this also widens the racial wealth gap between whites and minorities. 4 things. This bill reinstitutes slavery by making poor and the working class work for the upper echelon of society, the masters of society. It buys votes in time for the midterms, puts a down payment on the deepening recession, right? That's an oxymoron, and it widens the racial wealth gap between the whites and minorities. This is where I want to actually go to CNN for a few minutes. I can't believe it. The headline should be, CNN tells the truth. That's a major headline, in my opinion. And maybe getting rid of Brian Stelter is already working. All right, so hat tip to the Daily Caller. An economics professor from Johns Hopkins University said Tuesday on a CNN appearance that Biden's plan to forgive student loan debt would do a couple of things: make the racial wealth gap wider and make inflation worse. Now, for those of us that understand math, we would say, no, duh. This is the slavery here. All right. Now, here's what he has to say. The guy's name, by the way, is Mark Goldwein. He's or Goldwyn, Goldwein. He serves as a senior policy director for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And he was on CNN, interviewed by Poppy Harlow. And here's what he had to say, and I quote: "The issue is debt cancellation might reduce the racial wealth gap between 2 rich doctors, a rich black doctor and a rich white doctor." But he says, but it actually widens the racial wealth gap overall because disproportionately, listen to this, the people who hold student debt that went to college are white. And the 87% of Americans that didn't go to college are disproportionately minority. He uses people of color. I hate that term. People of color. Like, what the hell? Anyway, are minorities. All right. Now, guys, I'm not into all the race crap, race card stuff, but this is just a fact. And this is how this economist, who I assume is probably on the left, maybe he's not, but I assume if you're on CNN, I know they're trying to make things more moderate there, but I don't think they're anywhere close as of yet. But again, to just reiterate, he said it widens the racial wealth gap overall because disproportionately the people who hold student debt that went to college are white, and the 87% of Americans that didn't go to college are disproportionately people of color. And I forget, one of Biden's, it's the Secretary of Education, let it out the bag. He was asked whether or not the people that already paid off their debt would be screwed. And I'm paraphrasing. He's just like, yes. And what? That's where we are. That is where we are. Now, here's what the guy said. Goldwyn offered alternatives to debt forgiveness that could address the racial wealth gap. He said they would need a more targeted approach that would focus on fixing income-driven repayments and, more importantly, on getting college affordability in the first place. All right, so a couple of issues. We got to break that down. So fixing income-driven repayments would be just a pay scale, right? Or a sliding scale. You make X amount of money. This is how much you're going to have to pay monthly in order to pay back your student loan debt. If you make more, you're going to have to pay more. And then he says, more importantly, on getting college affordability in the first place. One of the ways in which you get college affordable is you got to take this student loan program out of the hands of the federal government. They exclusively own it now. Barack Obama did this in 2009, 2010, when at that point in time, federal student loans were 20% of the lending or accounted for 20% of the lending as far as college was concerned. The rest was private. The federal government, Barack Obama, totally flipped that. 80% of the lending came from the federal government. Then 20% went to private. But what the left did, what the Democrat Party did, they made the regulations so strict, the red tape so strict that those private lenders, it was no longer beneficial for them to lend. So the federal government essentially took it over. That's what the left wants to do. They want to take over everything. For all of you that think Barack Obama was a horrible president, he was. But he was a good president for the left because he laid the foundation for all of this stuff. And he doesn't get enough credit for destroying America. But he absolutely laid the foundation that Joe Biden is just building on. Another thing this guy says, he says that means pushing colleges to accept more AP credits and transfers from community colleges. So AP credits in high school, transfer from community college, that'll bring down the cost. No frills degrees, meaning none of these worthless degrees. So a lot of these sociologist degrees and sociology degrees and all this kind of stuff, a lot of stuff where you're gonna spend 50 or 200 grand on college or 100 grand on college, you're gonna come out and make 30 grand. Hey, let's get rid of those degrees. They're worthless. All right. And then administrative waste, any way that they can cut waste and administration, he says colleges should do. They're not going to do that because they're left-wing institutions. These people live in bubbles where it's just all about theory, and they don't know how to run jack squat. They don't know how money works, even though they want to destroy America. I know it's weird, but it's true. These people are evil. They want to destroy America, but they have no idea how money works. Remember, Stephen Moore and his foundation came out and explained how Biden's administration combined, I think, have like 10 years of real world experience between two people. The rest of his administration, these are all government lackeys that have been around, went from college to government jobs, and they have no clue what it's like to live in the real world. Student loan forgiveness will add inflationary pressure to the economy. Obviously. If you don't pay back the federal government, these students don't. Who's going to pay it back? We're going to have to pay it back. We're going to have to pay. This is essentially more spending. All of these people that think they're getting a cut, that's not going to happen. These students are going to pay back the loan. It'll just be through inflation. Again, high prices at the pump, high prices in the grocery store, higher prices buying clothing, shipping. All of that stuff is going to cost more, and they're going to have to hike interest rates. Watch, it's going to happen. Recall the consumer price index. Goldwyn reminded CNN of that. The consumer price index rose 8.5% year over year in July, following year over year increases of 9.1% in June and 8.6% in May. This is not good, and we keep spending money. Again, I just talked about $1.3 trillion that we're looking to spend from the Inflation Reduction Act, which is basically the Green New Deal. Another $300 billion. I'm sorry. I believe it was $300 billion to Ukraine. And then and now this, which is going to cost much more than $300 billion if this goes through. It's insane. It's insane. But this is what the left is doing. Here's another quote from this guy, Goldwyn. He says, what this is going to do is make it more difficult for us to get inflation down to 2% or 3%, which is where it really should be. So 2% or 3%. Remember, when Trump left office, inflation was at 1.7%. 1.7%, and the national average for gas was $2.39 per gallon. Democrats are still bragging about gas prices coming down when they're 60 to 65% higher than when Trump left office. People are just, oh my God. The second thing he says, it is going to make the Fed's job harder, and that means it's going to increase the risk they have to drive us into a recession to get inflation under control. Let me read that again. It is going to make the Fed's job harder, and that means it's going to increase the risk that they have to drive us into a recession to get inflation under control. We're already in a recession. He means a deep recession. He just didn't say that on CNN. Here's something that he did say that was spot on. One of the easiest ways to do that is to ask people to start paying back the debt they already owe. No crap, Kremlock. Start making the principal payments they already agreed to. And by the way, while not everybody that has student debt is rich, disproportionately, student debt is being held by people that have advanced degrees and pretty good income, and they could bear it a lot more than everyday Americans that are seeing the cost of their gasoline and clothing go up. Spot on. These let me just say this. If you're sitting here whooping and hollering and praising God for your debt being relieved, 10,000, 20, you are a selfish person. I'm sorry. You're selfish. You don't have the right to tell people that made the choice to save money and not go to college because they can't afford it. Hey, I know you're going to make less than me over your life by hundreds of thousands of dollars, but because I'm so selfish, I get to go to school. And since I don't want to pay back my loan, I'm going to make you that makes less than me and probably does menial labor, many of you, you're going to pay for me. This is the slave master mentality. And this is what the left wanted. This is what they're turning America in. A society of the have and the have-nots. Real quickly, I just want to play this audio clip for you of the man that looks like a walking piece of stretch leather, also known as a chameleon, also known as the former governor of Florida, also known as a former Republican, also known as a former independent, Charlie Crist. Gabe, let's play the audio and we'll end it with this.
Those who support the governor should stay with him and vote for him, and I don't want your vote. If you have that hate in your heart, keep it there.
Crist also said
Okay, so that was all we need to hear. So we're haters, apparently, because we like Governor DeSantis. We like having like being able to have free speech. We like having a successful economy. So we're haters because we like those things. Listen, I cannot wait. Just for that, I'm going to donate to DeSantis' campaign, and I'm going to work my butt off to make sure he gets elected. This guy is a chameleon. This guy's a fake. But he's representative of who the Democrat Party is. Guys, listen, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Again, please support my sponsor, MyPillow. Guys, their stuff is so freaking comfortable. I'm not even going to lie to you. I mean, not as if I would, but I mean, they're including their MyPillow. I had trouble finding a pillow that I could sleep on comfortably for years because I lost my pillow. I can't lie. I was a little, one of these weird people that liked a certain pillow that I kept around for decades. And somehow I lost it. Somewhere in between a move, I lost it. I cannot believe it. Drives me insane. But nonetheless, I used MyPillow. At first, I didn't like the feel of my pillow. Then I tried it. Perfect. And it's been extremely comfortable. I can't sleep without it at this point. I don't use any other pillow. But also right now, there is a deal for these Percale sheets, normally queen size. Again, $89.98. But for my listeners, $39.98. All you have to do is go to mypillow.com, click on that radio listener square, and enter the promo code Carl. That's CARL. Enter the promo code Carl, and you can get and honestly, those things, the Percale sheets are available in an array of sizes and colors. So it doesn't matter what size you get. And also you can use that promo code to shop mypillow.com, period. Use the promo code Carl. Also, please subscribe to the podcast everywhere podcasts are found. Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. We're trying to put more up on YouTube and Rumble. We really like to build our numbers there. You can help us out. Like, review, share them. please. That'll make a big difference. We really appreciate you doing that. And follow me on social media. Where you at, True Social? The Carl Jackson Show. The Carl Jackson Show. I'd love to see more of you on True Social. Love to see more of you on Getter. But I'm also on the old school ones. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. The Carl Jackson Show. Wherever you find me on social media. Guys, until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.